Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I have a lot going on. The recipes that I'll be showing you today you've already seen before. All three of these recipes are here on my channel. They're also in my cookbook. So what I'm making today is I'm making a batch of my cream of mushroom soup. I've got my ingredients there and kind of here. I'm also going to be making a batch of my beef stroganoff, which I've got some pasta here for that. I do have some ground beef in the fridge. And then I also have ingredients to make a batch of my spaghetti. Also ground beef in the fridge for that. Last year, when I had a bunch of tomatoes, I made a whole bunch of my tomato sauce. It's diced tomatoes, some onions, all of the seasonings, all of that for my spaghetti sauce. And then to make it more sauce-like, I do have tomato sauce and a can of tomato paste. And then of course my pasta for spaghetti as well. Once I get all of these cooked, I'm gonna freeze dry them. And it's a little bit different when you're getting things ready to go in the freeze dryer. Oils and fats do not freeze dry. If you want your freeze dried product and result to have a fairly long shelf life, it is best to eliminate as much of the fat or grease as possible. So when I'm making my cream of mushroom soup, I won't be using any butter. And then once I cook the ground beef, I'll show you when we get to that. But there's a method that I do, that other people also do, to eliminate any grease that might be left in the ground beef. And then also with my spaghetti sauce, normally I would saute the onions and mushrooms and things like that in some olive oil. I'm not going to be doing that today either. Which I'm curious to see how my cream of mushroom soup will turn out with no fat. I still have the flour here to make the roux to make it a cream sauce, which there won't be any fat to absorb, just water. But again, this is for a freeze-dried meal. And for backpacking or camping, or even, a worst case scenario, an emergency situation, to eat beef stroganoff, I don't know that you would really care that your cream soup might not be exactly how it's supposed to be. As long as it tastes good and it's nutritious, that's all that matters. I'm just going to keep on cutting all of this up. We'll cook the cream soup first, and then we'll get to the ground beef, and then I'll show you how I'm going to do that to get ready to freeze dry. So since I've got my freeze dryer, I've done quite a few things. I've done fruits, I've done vegetables, and now I'm starting on things like meals. It really saves a lot of money if you can buy in bulk, or maybe if these particular things are on sale at your local grocery store. And because everything is getting so expensive nowadays, I really want to make the most out of all of these ingredients. And because all three of these recipes use very similar ingredients, I figured I would just go ahead and make all three. I should have gotten bigger bowls, as always, but this is okay. So now, because we are not using any kind of butter or oil or anything, I'm going to turn my pan on, about medium-high. Once my pan is hot, I'm going to throw in my onion and celery and my mushrooms and my garlic. I'm not worried that my garlic will burn because all of the other ingredients will keep that from burning, and the mushrooms have a lot of liquid, so they will all just saute, and if they need a little bit more liquid than what's in there, I can just add in a splash of chicken stock, and then I'll make the roux with just my chicken stock and the flour, and we'll see how it turns out. Now that my pan is hot, I'm going to add in my onions and celery, mushrooms and garlic, and then salt and pepper, however much you like. I ended up adding in, as you saw, a little bit of chicken stock just so it doesn't burn, and I may add a little bit more. And then over here, I've got, about 3 pounds of ground beef. And I'm going to cook it all at the same time in my big pot here, even though half of it will go for the beef stroganoff and the other half for my spaghetti. But I'm going to cook it all at the same time because we need to rinse it off really well and get as much grease off as we can. And I've tried to get the leanest ground beef to help with that as well. So while our vegetables are sauteing, get another spatula here. I'm going to get my ground beef going and get this all browned, and then we'll rinse it off. And then what I do to rinse off my ground beef is I've got a couple of strainers over there, and I'll just put it in there and run hot water over it. And then I will line a cookie sheet right here with paper towels and let it drain and try to get even more grease off of it. And that little bit of chicken stock did the trick to get my vegetables sauteing. And I'm not going to add any salt and pepper to my ground beef because I'm going to rinse it all off anyways. Now that my vegetables are getting nice and soft, I'm going to start sprinkling in my flour. And periodically stir your ground beef. And once you've got all that flour in there, just give it a really good stir. I'm going to add just a little bit of chicken stock. Give this a really good stir. And now pour in the rest. Once this comes up to a boil, I'll turn it down to a simmer and let it simmer till it gets thick and my vegetables are all the way cooked. And even though I've shown you these recipes before, as you can see, I'm doing them a little bit differently, but once my ground beef is all the way cooked, I won't be cooking it with the onion or anything else like that for the spaghetti and the beef stroganoff. I want to keep as much grease out of it, so I plan on cooking all of the components and then stirring in the ground beef at the last minute, and then it won't have a chance to possibly render out any more grease. We'll see. And in case you're concerned, I don't plan on dumping all of this grease down the sink. Of course, when we rinse it off, some of it will go down the drain. It can't be helped. But I do plan on catching most of the grease in a bowl in the strainer before I rinse it. And because my ground beef is a really lean ground beef, there's really not very much fat in here at all. And we'll just pour this into my strainer. So now just hot water. And now we'll go on to my paper towel lined cookie sheet. And I can hear that my soup is boiling. So I'm going to turn this down to low. And you can see it's nice and thick. And once your vegetables are as done as you'd like them to be, slowly stir in your half and half. Now that my soup is all finished, I'm going to measure out the 2 cups I need for my beef stroganoff. I've got all of the other ingredients ready for my beef stroganoff. I've got my water heating up here. I'm going to turn it up to high. And then I've mentioned this brand of pasta before. I really like it. And this is just the elbows. And then I'm going to put in, probably a cup or so of frozen peas, as in my recipe. For the spaghetti, I have a different brand of gluten-free pasta, and this is also a pretty good brand. So I thought it would be a good idea to try 2 different brands of gluten-free pasta and see what the freeze-dried end result is. I've washed both of my pots just to make it easier on myself to not have so many dishes. And then when I'm done with this, I'll wash them again and use them again for the spaghetti. Although I have a really big handle strainer here that I plan on just pouring in the pasta to my beef stroganoff and then using the same hot water for the other pasta. Might as well, I hate to waste so much water. I'm going to turn this on about medium-high and start my onions, mushrooms, and garlic sauteing. Hopefully the mushrooms will add a little bit of water and I won't need to add any water, but we'll see. And then I've got my 2 cups of measured cream of mushroom soup, 1 cup of sour cream, and I'm going to dump about half of these mushrooms in here. Half of my onion, my garlic, salt and pepper, and then just give this a really good stir. and it's really doing a nice job with the liquid from the mushrooms that's coming out. As I mentioned in my last freeze drying video, I am an affiliate with Harvest Right freeze dryers. My link is below. It doesn't cost you anything extra if you purchase a freeze dryer using my link, but it does give me a little bit of money from being an affiliate with them, and that helps support my channel and goes to making more videos to show you like this. So 1 freeze dryer tray for the beef stroganoff, and then probably 2 trays of the spaghetti is what I'm thinking, but we'll see. And you can see how much liquid these mushrooms are putting off and sauteing themselves and the onion and garlic. Pour in my cream of mushroom soup, and I'm actually going to turn off the heat. Throw in my frozen peas, my 1 cup of sour cream, and stir this all together. My water has just come up to a boil. And I plan on cooking my pasta until it is done, but still has just a little bit of bite to it. The sauce is still a little bit hot, and I'm not sure how it's going to reconstitute, so I'm erring on the side of a little bit not quite done yet. That way, when it's all freeze dried and you heat it up to eat it later on and you add extra water, it won't get super soggy and mushy. Or I'm hoping. We'll find out. Take out a little piece of pasta. See how done it is? That is perfect. So I'm going to turn the heat down to very low. Move the pan very close. And just start pouring in my pasta. And I'm working as quickly as I can so the pasta that's still in the pot doesn't continue cooking too much. And here I thought that was the last one. Oh, maybe this is the last one. And I'm just going to let that sit on low for a few minutes while I get all of this stirred together. And I'm actually thinking now it might fill up 2 trays. Bring back our ground beef, and I'm just going to eyeball about half of this. And I'm assuming just my hand will be the easiest way to get this all in there. And then just give this a really good stir. And I've mentioned before, these trays for the medium-sized freeze dryer hold about 4 cups. One of the things when you're filling up a freeze dryer tray is you want to make sure it's full, but you don't want to fill it too full. Okay, 2 trays of my beef stroganoff are ready to go. And then I've got these tray stackers here that I got off of Amazon. I'll also put a link for those below. These really make it so handy. And you also don't want your trays too full, so you get the bottom of your other pan dirty. And I will cover these in plastic wrap, but not yet. They're still pretty warm, and I don't want to trap in any extra heat and keep cooking that pasta. So same as before, mushrooms go in, onions and garlic go in, and salt and pepper. And I don't know if you do anything like this, but to me, if I'm going to be in the kitchen cooking, I'm going to try and get as much done in one day that I can. And what a useful way. I had so much ground beef. I can make 2 different recipes that will give me quite a few meals on my shelf. And I'm hoping this is okay, doubling up on the same pasta water. I've never done that before, so we'll see. My pasta water is up to a boil, so I'm going to dump in my spaghetti. So once my onions, mushrooms, and garlic are sauteed all together like this, I'm going to pour in my tomato sauce, now my tomato paste, and my 2 pints of diced tomatoes that are homemade. And give all of this a really good stir, mix it all together. And I'm going to take this off of the heat. And I find that tongs are so much easier with spaghetti noodles. Let's taste this one that I threw out of the pot. And that is as done as I want the spaghetti to be. I have a strainer in my sink. And as much as I tried, I've got 2 noodles in here that are from beef stroganoff. That's all right. And before this has, oh, there's another one. And those are awfully squishy now. And I did run this under cold water because I used the same water as my other pasta. I didn't want this to be super starchy pasta. And before I stir them into my sauce, I'm going to pour in the rest of my ground beef. So give this a really good stir. And I'm going to pour in my pasta. It's a little more challenging to stir with spaghetti noodles. Let me get my tongs. I think they might be a little easier. So it looks like 1 batch of my spaghetti sauce with noodles will fill up 2 trays as well. So that actually works out perfect. And I really tried to do a good job of making sure they're both even amounts of sauce and pasta. So now once these come to room temperature, I'll cover these in plastic wrap, cover those in plastic wrap, and they'll go into the freezer. And I'd like them to go in the freezer for at least 24 hours before I put them in the freeze dryer. So here we are again in the basement. My beef stroganoff and spaghetti have been in the freezer for about 48 hours. Sometimes you can't get to things as soon as you'd like to. Before I get started with my freeze dryer, I always check my bucket. After the machine defrosts and it drains into the bucket, you always want to make sure that you have emptied your bucket. And I actually use an old kitty litter bucket. It works so good. It has a really small opening. It has a lid if you need a lid, but it also has a handle. And it fits on the side of my machine. But I really like the kitty litter bucket to catch the water. It's so much easier than a 5-gallon bucket that you pick up, and if it's kind of full and you're clumsy like me, you might slosh your water when you're trying to carry it wherever you're taking it to. And then I've closed the drain valve. So now that we're ready to go, I'm going to turn on the freeze dryer and the pump. And you don't have to close the drain valve now. It will prompt you when it is time, but I do, and then I just double check it. So now we are ready to go. My door is closed, and I've showed you this before, but I'll just give you a little refresher here. Once I push start, it will start the cool down process and say in 15 minutes load in the food. So we'll push start. So here is our gluten-free spaghetti and beef stroganoff. It's been 15 minutes, so now we just open the door. And then we just press continue. And once again, the machine will go through the freezing cycle, which everything's already frozen, but the machine needs to get down to the temperature, and then it will vacuum freeze, the pump will turn on, and then it will go into dry time. And I've mentioned before, write everything down. We're about 10 minutes in to the extra dry time. Because both of my trays are pasta and meat, I really want to make sure they have a pretty good amount of extra dry time. So here we are. It's actually been about 46 hours. I'm going to use my moisture meter. Here's a tray of our spaghetti. Here's my next tray of spaghetti. But it has shrunk around the edges. Beef stroganoff. And this one too has shrunk around the edges. So these are all dry. I'm going to turn off the machine, but I'm first going to choose no defrost. And then I'm going to turn off the machine and the pump. I prefer not to use the defrost function on the machine and just let it defrost at room temperature. So my plan for the beef stroganoff and the spaghetti is to divide each tray into 3 portions and then package up each separate portion. I figure that's about 1 to 2 servings. And even though the bag's a little bit bigger than what the portion will be, it's what I've got to work with until I can get some smaller-ish bags. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a tray of our beef stroganoff and then just with my spatula cut it into about 3 portions here. Kind of hard with the noodles in there. I'm mostly curious about the pasta, but I do want to get a little bit of everything in a little bowl to rehydrate so we can taste it. So now I'm just going to start filling up a bag. I actually like to use a spatula, but I also like to feel it and kind of crumble it apart and see that it is completely dry. And I've mentioned before, you really want to work quickly, especially if you live somewhere where it's humid. And I've got my oxygen absorbers here. Put one in. And then I try and get out as much air as possible. And I know it's only using about half of the bag, and that's fine. And then I'm going to double seal it. So I've got 2 seals there. So that one is done. I'm going to continue on with the beef stroganoff, do the exact same thing with this tray, divide it in 3. So I packaged up 1 tray of spaghetti already. That rhymes. And then I've got my other tray, and it's really interesting. I'm not super concerned that the noodles will be in small pieces because my plan is to be camping or hiking, and it doesn't matter. In fact, I think it would actually be easier if they're broken in small pieces to just eat it with a spoon or something like that. That will be our little test piece here. And if I'm taking these backpacking, I would flatten the bag as much as I could just to make room in my pack. So then it would really be broken apart anyways. And these spaghetti noodles, they almost remind me of, I think it's the chow mein noodles. Of course, I can't have those anymore, but that's what they remind me of. Okay. 6 bags of spaghetti, 6 bags of beef stroganoff. So now for the taste test. I have freeze-dried meat and vegetables before, and I already know that that works really good. But pasta, especially gluten-free pasta, I'm really curious about. So I'm going to get some water boiling in the microwave. And because I haven't written on my bags yet, I'm keeping them separate. But while I'm waiting for the water to boil, and depending on the size of your family and who is going to be eating or sharing your meal with you, portion and package what would be best for what you're going to use it for. For this would be 1 large serving or 2 regular servings. Water is nice and hot. I'm just going to pour a little bit on each one. Stir that around and stir this one around. And I always use the rule of thumb, you can always add more water. Once you've added too much, it's kind of hard to go back from. Unless you are going to reheat this in some kind of saucepan or something, then you could cook it and evaporate some of that extra water, but it might change the texture. And because the beef stroganoff noodles are a little bit bigger, I'm just turning them over to get into the water. So I'm just going to let these sit and rehydrate, add some more water if needed, and finish writing on all of my bags. So I've got everything labeled. So now you won't mix up what you think is what it might not be. And let's check on our rehydrated and see how it's doing. And I think some of my beef stroganoff needs a little bit more water. Some of those noodles are still a little bit hard. And it seems like our spaghetti is doing really well. I feel like the elbow noodles are really falling apart, but the spaghetti noodles are actually holding together really well. Although if you stir it around, they're falling apart too. So I'm gonna give my spaghetti a taste here, see what the texture of my noodles will be. That's so interesting. The noodles, they're pretty soft. If I were gonna cook a batch of spaghetti, you wouldn't cook your noodles to be this soft. But the flavor is really good. The texture's actually not bad. Interestingly enough, my mushrooms are a lot firmer than I expected them to be. So that's something that's interesting. But the flavor is perfect. And it still surprises me that ground beef, it keeps its same texture. So on the trail or at a campsite, this one is a win for sure. It doesn't look very appetizing, and it might, if you stir it a lot, it might just kind of all fall apart, but it would still taste really good. And for me, sometimes with backpacking, it doesn't really matter so much what you're eating and what it looks like, as long as it's nutritious and it tastes good. So that is a win-win on the spaghetti. And there's still a little bit of water floating around here with my beef stroganoff, which is actually all right because those mushrooms, maybe they'll absorb a little more of that water. Okay, let's give this a bite. It doesn't look very great. I think it needs some salt. And even though the noodles have fallen apart, when you take a bite, you don't notice that much. So all in all, I think this has been a really good success. Gluten-free, freeze-dried pasta. And I'm still, and I've said this before, I'm still so surprised, but now I've got 12 meals that I can take camping or backpacking or just put on my shelf for maybe an evening where I don't have a lot of time to make dinner. And here is dinner. Throw a vegetable with it and you're good to go. I haven't really freeze-dried any of my gluten-free baked goods yet. I'm a little bit leery because I use honey instead of sugar, and I know really sweet sugary things and honey don't freeze-dry very well, but I am working on some of those and curious to see what I can come up with. So again, if you are interested in purchasing a freeze dryer and you use my link, that little bit of extra money that I would earn would help support bringing more freeze-drying videos to you. If you found this video interesting, let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you have something in mind that you would like for me to freeze-dry that would be gluten-free, and I'll see what I can do working on that. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next one.